This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we're talking with Mike Branch, Vice President, Data and Analytics at Geotab. Mike, thanks for taking the time. Great to see you.
No problem. Happy to be here.
So we're going to dive into a topic that I think the entire world is talking about right now in artificial intelligence. Lots of exciting things going on, lots of maybe questions coming from this technology. Geotab has recently made an announcement about Project G, a generative AI. So let's just start there. We've all heard about ChatGPT. Maybe some of us are using it, right? How do you bring that technology to the trucking world, and what is Project G all about?
No, thanks. Yeah, it's been a very interesting year, right? We've seen so much since ChatGPT first announced itself back toward the end of 2022. And so what we're doing is we're trying to bring that the large language models, the capability of those models to our fleet customers, right? And really, I always say it comes down to one simple thing. It's reducing time to insight for our customers. Our customers are bombarded with a deluge of data all the time, and there have been a number of ways that people have tried to tackle this problem in the past, right? Bringing up dashboards and all these kinds of things. And it's still very complex. I mean, we deal in a world where there's, 40, 50,000 customers that we've got all operating different kinds of fleets. People wanting a slightly different cut of their data all the time. It's always a slightly different cut of their data. And so when I'm asked the question, did our customers ask us to bring generative AI to our product? The answer is no, but did they ask us to provide insights in a much more salient and quicker manner? Yes, absolutely. So that's the intent behind Project G. So it's a beta. We announced it back in June, and just this week, actually, we started onboarding our first customers onto the beta project. And what we do is we leverage the power of these large language models, right, to be able to contextually understand the question that is being asked by the fleet owner, or it might be the person in sustainability, the safety manager, whoever's working with the fleet, and be able to leverage the power of the data that we've already got in our ecosystem at Geotab, and then produce an answer very, very quickly, right? So questions that might be asked, how productive is my fleet, right? And then what it does is it assumes what productivity means. And so an assumption I've seen it commonly make is, well, productivity is related to the most miles driven, rightly or wrongly, right? And so what it then does is it provides us back a series of code that we can run in our ecosystem that brings those insights back to our customers. So I can have a chat-based interface with my fleet data while keeping and preserving the privacy of that fleet data at Geotab as well too. And if that question isn't quite right, if it didn't interpret it right, if productivity isn't the most miles driven, right, you would be able to ask a question like, well, let's assume productivity is related to the most stops in the least amount of distance. And then it would kind of compute that as well. So again, we're really trying to drive a shorter time to insight for our customers, leveraging generative AI. But a lot of this simply wouldn't be made possible if you don't have the right insights to begin with. And we've been doing AI for years, right? So if you don't have the right, whether it's predictive maintenance, safety, contextualization, all these things built up as a suite, it doesn't have a lot to draw from, right? So its intelligence is really predicated on a lot of the work that, in this case, we've done to date to get the data to where it needs to be.
Right. So let me see if I'm following you here too, and correct me if I'm wrong in some of this. So it seems like it'll impact how I interact with services and solutions, right? You mentioned the dashboards. Everyone's very familiar with dashboards. I look at the dashboards. I have a question in my mind I want to answer when I'm looking at dashboards, and then I hunt through the dashboards to try to find the answers. But in this case, that process was I get to talk to some degree to the AI and ask it something like, okay, what which trucks or routes are my least fuel efficient routes? Could I ask it that, or where could I improve my fuel efficiency? Would those be questions that I could walk through with it?
Yeah, those are the exact kinds of questions. And it's predicated on the knowledge it has right now in this first iteration of our Geotab Data Connector,
Okay.
which is in the wide sweeping vastness of every single piece of insight that we have at Geotab. But the idea is to continue to build on these. So I can ask it, questions like, which are my most fuel efficient vehicles?
Okay.
And we've done all that computation. Or which are my most fuel efficient hybrid vehicles? Or my most fuel efficient heavy duty trucks? Or which make and model in my fleet is the most fuel? So you can ask it all those kinds of questions, which is pretty interesting. And if it doesn't understand the question, or if it's not been provided that level of data, it will simply reply to you, hey, I don't understand this now.
Right.
And here is what I do. Here is the corpus of what I do understand.
Right. Right.
And then what we try to do as well, as much as possible, is play back what we heard, right? Because oftentimes that's the challenge with these large language models, is that the interpretation of what you've asked it and how it chooses to answer
Right.
is a bit different, right? So, and it's a complicated thing to get right. So what we try to do is, once the question is asked, kind of play back what we heard. And if you are, a technical specialist, there's a little bit of a code. You can click on this little code icon, and it actually relays to you what we actually did behind the scenes.
Oh, I see.
So that if we're computing an average and you were anticipating a median or something, you could easily see that in the code that was generated. And we're working continuously on ways to make sure that as we're providing that insight back to the customer, it's more and more explainable, because I think that's really important.
Right. Well, and even as this develops and people use these AI-driven solutions a little bit more, right? There's kind of this learning curve, I feel like, where you'll start with it and you'll ask it, okay, well, what's my fuel efficiency across my fleet, and it'll spit out an answer, and it's right, and you're like, okay, that's cool. And then you start treating it more like someone like you and I would be having a conversation. And then it starts spitting out things that maybe aren't what I'm looking for. Then you realize, oh, I have to be really specific about it's not a person, it's a tool. It's taking me very literally when I might be speaking figuratively. Are there any misconceptions about AI or the tool in general, or people's expectations of what this will or won't do that you have to guide them through as you're developing this?
Yeah, I think the funny thing is, like, we always start off, because for us this is very clearly a beta at this point in time, right? And we want to involve our customers in this experiment so deeply, right? Because we will learn by the kinds of questions our customers are asking. And so every single question that is asked, we are recording. We're telling our customers we're recording, because we want to learn. We want to make sure that the answers that we're providing to you are best in class. And so some of the misconceptions, that even so much as you talk about what it can understand to date, they always push the boundary. We're finding on the question, like, no, it doesn't understand that just yet, but it will. But they will continue. But that's good for us. I would much rather our customers ask it as much as possible, so that we can understand where the value really lies. And so part of this as a product initiative is really helpful to us, because now all of a sudden there's an inclination to understand very, very deeply what our customers are very tuned to being interested in. So I think the misconception is that it understands everything right off the bat, but we're doing our best to educate our customers that here's the corpus that it does understand today. Here's what you can do with it, and we will continue to grow and evolve that. And then I think there's, from a technical perspective, there's this misconception that, hey, is this going to now, take over jobs or this kind of thing? And I think it will change the impact, change the definition of what a data analyst does on a day-to-day basis, or a data scientist. In my mind's eye, what we're trying to give our customers here is a bit of a data analyst or data scientist in your pocket, right? Whereby you can ask some of these more complicated questions, and it gives you some insight. So now I think the data analyst role is going to, not only within fleet, but broadly, is going to change, right? These need to be tools that are used by analysts in their toolbox to be able to generate value for customers, because I think it abstracts a lot of some of the simpler things to do, but there's still a lot of complexity in all this, and as we stitch together large language models with understanding of you know data from a specific commercial entity, how do we do that in a way that preserves privacy, keeps data safe while benefiting from these large language models? These are all really interesting things that we're uncovering.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on one hand, you mentioned does it replace people? I think right now it knows a lot, but it doesn't know you. It doesn't know the business. It doesn't know what you're looking for. It's a lot like a brand new employee, like a person fresh out of college. They have the skills. There's information there. You got to work with them to figure out what you're looking for. Here's what I'm looking for. And in that same regard, though, that can bring a lot of, you mentioned the data analyst part, and you think about some of those small and mid-sized fleets that a lot of people wear a lot of different hats in those companies. It'll bring a lot of that power to them in the same way that telematics and dashboards brought visibility into their fleet and began that. Now it'll just get them those answers a little quicker and be able to do a little bit more.
Exactly. And I think what that will do, and maybe we won't see the impact or effects immediately, but if you're in a position within an organization to impact change, you're maybe the sustainability manager or you're driving toward electric vehicles, oftentimes you have to do a lot of analysis to prove your business case out, right? It takes time, right? It takes sometimes months of time to crunch through these numbers. If you can reduce that time to insight, your ability to make change within the organization shortens. So if you're looking at adoption of electric vehicles or reducing emissions, just think about how much quicker we could do some of these things if you put the power in the hands of those change agents who previously may not have had an analyst to work with or didn't have that skill set in the past. So that's what I think we'll see the power in terms of the speed to insight, speed to decision making. And I don't think it'll happen quite overnight, but I think that's the route that I'd love to see things pushed to, because that allows us to make some really transformative change with data.
Right. That's a really interesting use case if you put it to work on a whole decarbonization strategy across the fleet and how to move toward there. That's super interesting. Okay, lastly for you, it's an interesting product. It's also a complicated product, not just in how it works, but how it's being adopted and interacted and thought about and talked about. Geotab, in working with you all over the years, you've been a proponent of data privacy and being as transparent about the data uses as you can be with your customers of here's where we're going with it, here's what we're doing. What is your take on the responsibility that solutions providers using data like yourselves have in this AI world now? What is the role of data privacy when artificial intelligence is in the mix?
Yeah, it doesn't go away at all. I think it has to be top of mind, front and center to everything that you do. As we look at data privacy and risk, when it comes to generative AI, there are new things certainly that come to play. But there's also a lot of the old hat that we've been doing for years that still maintains that level of consistency, right? Where we're still, our data is always kept private for all of our customers, right? We have a data risk committee, we have data privacy standards, we have anonymization and de-identification standards. We have all of that baked into our privacy program. The complexity that generative AI, I think, brings to play is in the interpretation of that data, right? So you may have access to the data as a customer, but the interpretation of your question, making sure we're playing it back to you in a way that allows you to make a well-informed decision and that you understand what the generative piece, what the model is actually doing. That's incumbent upon us as developers, as practitioners of AI, to responsibly look at the kinds of questions that are being asked, the answers that are being provisioned, consistently monitoring that as part of that feedback loop and that process. So we've engaged, certainly in the development of Project G and everything that we're doing from a generative AI perspective. We've got a generative AI policy at Geotab. We involve our privacy office. Actually, we have a data privacy specialist that sits within our data and analytics environment as well too, and constantly looking at how can the system be gained? How can you get answers out of the model that you may not expect? What is it looking like? So that's why the recording of each question and each answer is really critical for us to see how it's evolving. But I think, wow, you get all of this right, and it's not easy. It is complex, and you have to go into it kind of open-minded and knowing that there are absolutely risks out there. The transformational change is, wow, it's incredible, right? I think you do this right, you can put a lot of power in the hands of our customers. But we are releasing it as a beta to learn as we go, because this is all new. This is new for everyone, right?
Yep, for sure. Mike, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm interested in learning more as you roll out. I appreciate you bringing your human intelligence here to help me figure out what's going on with everything. Always a blast talking with you. I'm sure I'll talk to you again very soon.
Yeah, you too. Pleasure as always.